With Mike Tomlin stepping down, the Steelers should be in full rebuild mode. But what does that mean for Aaron Rodgers? We get into that and more on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst for the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we're going to talk about the teams that lost in the playoffs that are going to have a bit of a shake-up, or maybe it's going to look a lot of the same. Like for the Packers here, we don't know how much change there will be. It looks like Matt LaFleur will be back, but the Chargers, they went on and fired Greg Roman. Their offense could look different next year, and something has to change with Justin Herbert in those playoff games. And then the big one here is the Steelers. They get their butts kicked by the Texans. Very upsetting game for myself to have to sit through. But then the very next day, Mike Tomlin decides to step down, and we don't know if he'll be coaching next year or on TV, but he will not be the Steelers head coach. So they should have a whole new coaching staff. Arthur Smith is likely gone. Terrell Austin, I don't know. He should have been gone anyways. But so new head coach, new OC, new DC, and I would have to guess new quarterback, right? Because Aaron Rodgers, how would he be back? I don't think that'd be enticing for any head coach to come there to say you have to be with Rodgers. But Rodgers already this year, quarterback 28 in fantasy points on average. Do you think he retires, comes back to Pittsburgh, goes somewhere else? What are you envisioning here with Rodgers?
Yeah, I think if they were committed to try to keep it somewhat intact, to try to win and maybe make some changes more with not rebuilding in mind, like try to fix some of the things that went wrong this year, both offensively and defensively, with Tomlin in the mix, then you could maybe convince him to play another year. He did say he liked playing at Pittsburgh, but a lot of that was tied to playing for Tomlin. Now you don't have Tomlin, so that changes everything else. Now, can they do enough here around to make him believe that they're still going to be competitive and try to win here in 2026? Or is it, as you said at the top, rebuilding? And then why would he want to be there for that? I mean, he's 42. He's going to be looking for a way to win big. And the only way I see that happening for him is potentially going to a team like the Vikings if they want to contingently plan over JJ McCarthy. But the Vikings necessarily didn't want him. Maybe they had more expectations for McCarthy last year, and now they got some more reality with him not being able to stay healthy or efficient or effective. So there's that option, right? Aaron Rodgers could look to make that jump and find one more team that he could contend with. Jets didn't work out. The Steelers were a little bit better. Maybe he'll find one more place that actually works out for him. So there's a lot of question marks here, but the bottom line is, look, you're not going to look at Rodgers himself in fantasy. The replacement, if it's Mason Rudolph, you're not going to look there. But someone else we might consider, but they need to get some help. DK Metcalf was wide receiver 24. This is actually disappointing on average scoring. We know he missed the last couple games as well, so he wasn't reliable for you in your fantasy championship round with that suspension. So, look, DK Metcalf had his moments. He scored some touchdowns. He made some big plays, but it wasn't consistent enough, and he finished at the bottom of the wide receiver twos in half point PPR. So, a lot of it Metcalf, that acquisition and kind of swapping out George Pickens was tied to getting Aaron Rodgers, a go-to guy. Well, it didn't work out all that well. He got double teamed a lot of situations and games where he could just torch the defense, single coverage. He did it, but that was few and far between here, and the numbers didn't add up very well when you're maybe having higher expectations for Metcalf. So they got to get some help, whether it's the free agency or the draft. They've got to get other wide receivers. And I say that plural because they don't really have a lot of depth at that position. They need a number 2. They need a number 3 that they can trust in the slot. You can't trot out Adam Thielen and his 36-year-old body for some wide receiver help in the playoffs. It just doesn't work. So, look, it's going to take a lot to trust Metcalf as more than what he is right now. Wide receiver 2 at the bottom, maybe declining to wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I mean, with Metcalf, it's all going to come down to the quarterback who they end up getting. Because, like Rodgers, like you said, I don't see him coming back to the Steelers. It wouldn't make much sense right now. Maybe the Colts could be an option for him, a team that, that Daniel Jones goes down and everything goes haywire there in Indianapolis. Maybe Rodgers can make a run there. But with DK, you're right. But I mean, also at the same time, it's not like DK had this terrible year in terms of fantasy for what he's been doing. 3 out of the last 4 seasons, he's averaged right around 10.5 points per game in fantasy and half PPR. So this is just kind of who he is. He depends a lot on touchdowns, and he only got 6 this year. And I don't know if it's going to get any better. I would assume that the only quarterback, it's not like there's a bunch of free agents sitting out there. So they're probably going to have to go in the draft, and they have a later pick in the first round. So who knows who they'll end up being able to get. Now, I do think with all the issues on this team that maybe the running backs are pretty safe to keep their jobs, and Jalen Warren and Kenneth Walker, right? Because, I mean, they need a new quarterback. They need another wide receiver. They have a lot of holes on defense as well. They really can't be wasting a prime capital on a running back here. So Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, I think they did good enough this year to say you can kind of roll with them next year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if they get Caleb Johnson out of the doghouse and see if he's got any value to them going forward. He was a second-round pick, so we can't totally rule it out. And also know you'll have a new coaching staff, or maybe Tomlin and Arthur Smith had a different perspective on Johnson. Then you'll get someone to say, hey, he's talented. He still needs to be on the field here. But you're right. Right now, Gainwell, I'm a little bit worried about, right? I mean, Gainwell is a little bit more of a necessity. They needed to generate somebody to make some plays, right? Jalen Warren was running fine. You look at their finishes, Jalen Warren was RB19 on average, a half point PPR. So exactly what we thought, maybe, and RB2. We just didn't see Caleb Johnson being effective. Instead, Gainwell got that value as a flex play at RB26. So if he had gotten more consistent touches, I think he would have finished in the top 24 pretty easily. So that's the question. Is this what you want to go with going forward? Was Gainwell and Warren used a lot because they didn't really have a lot else going on? So that's what my one concern is going forward. The targets, there's a lot of targets to go around to other people. If they get the extra help at receiver and look, tight end, I think you'll probably stay status quo. If Darnell Washington returns healthy, I think you'll probably see him and Pat Freiermuth being the guys again. But I think you'll probably see more 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers, assuming they move on from Arthur Smith. And that's what we're assuming right now, because if they blow up Mike Tomlin, you figure new guys are going to want his new guys.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if they go with an offensive-minded head coach or defense. They're getting a lot of connections to Brian Flores, but it's all going to determine which OC he can bring with him as well, right? So I would, as a Steelers fan, I would love Robert Saleh. Or maybe Mike LaFleur if we want to go offensive route for the Rams OC, go that route. But it will definitely be an interesting offseason for the Steelers. It's been a long time since we've been excited for this offense in terms of fantasy prospects, right? So maybe things can start to change over the next year or two, and we could start getting excited about this offense. We are going to transition now to talk about the Packers. They lose in a game that they should have never lost to the Bears. They had a massive lead and allowed so many points in the fourth quarter. Jordan Love, though, did have a good game. Matt LaFleur will be back with the Packers. So we'll talk about them and their fantasy future right after a quick break. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsors jobs. Put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. You'll love how simple Quo is. Makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can keep your existing number. And Quo's smart AI tools automatically logs calls, summarizes conversations, and highlights next steps, so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise Quo is the number one rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnfl. That's quo.com/lockedonnfl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, I want to thank you all again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen of the day. You're already with us every day, so now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Fantasy Football with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonfantasyfootball.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, let's get to these Packers. They lose to the Bears after being up big. They say that Matt LaFleur will be back. Jordan Love on the season, pretty disappointing overall as a fantasy quarterback. It hasn't been great for him in fantasy since his huge half of a season went in back in 2023. So he finished as a quarterback 21 in average this year. He did have a big wild card game. He was not the reason they lost this game. 323 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I think the bigger concern with him when it comes to fantasy is that so much is relied upon with his arm because he just refuses to run the ball. He had 0 rushing touchdowns this year. So Jordan Love's just not going to be a guy I'm ever excited to draft in fantasy.
Yeah, that's a big change from when he was producing early in his career as a starter, not as a rookie, but when he was out there for the first time starting for the Packers, he did a little bit of that. He scored touchdowns as a runner as well, but now you get nothing like that. And he's a good athlete. That's what's weird about it, right? He can take off and run if he needed to add that element to his game, but he's really insistent on staying in the pocket or moving around and throwing downfield. And look, he has some receivers to do that, and we saw some numbers put up here. Look, we can say the whole Packers receiving core was a wash. I think Jaden Reed is going to need to take a lot here to kind of put us back in his good graces. He finished as wide receiver 71 in average scoring. So also a guy that you absolutely cannot trust to be healthy. Romeo Doubs, even with a few big games, was at wide receiver 41. This might surprise you, Michelle, that Christian Watson, when he was healthy, wide receiver 17. So that was actually a pretty strong finish for a guy that, look, was fickle with his role, didn't know exactly how healthy he was going to come back to be and effective, but he clearly is the most talented of these receivers, right? He's big, strong, fast, can score touchdowns, make the big plays downfield. So, excuse me, when you look at him, I just see him as a number one type receiver. And I think you started to see that a little bit as they could trust him to stay healthy on the outside. So he's maybe the only receiver I'm still interested in on this team going forward. We'll see what they do. Matthew Golden would be the other one, right, that you would look at, but he's got to have a bigger role. I mean, 1 touchdown and it comes in the playoff game against the Bears. He's got to show us that he's the clear number 2. I will want them to get rid of all these other guys like the Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs and Reed as like key targets and just make it more about Watson and Golden. And then I might buy in more of these receivers. I also think that would be good for Jordan Love's production when he has 2 reliable, consistent threats. You get back Tucker Kraft, you might have some ability there as well. So that's what we need as a pocket passer for Jordan Love to really push through if he's not giving the runnings. He needs those 3 reliable weapons. Well, he was down to one at the end of the season because Kraft went down. The other guys weren't there, and Watson was the only guy there. So I don't know. I don't think you'll have much change here in this passing game because Matt LaFleur is also the play caller. So if he's staying, that's what we're going to look at. But I think the bigger question, I think, is going to be Josh Jacobs. Like, are we going to see a change there? He still was very solid RB8 there, tied with Chase Brown. I mean, in terms of average scoring. So he had a good season there. But do the wheels come off here? They flashed a little bit of Emmanuel Wilson there. Is this the end here getting close? The volume is getting high on Josh Jacobs.
I think so with Josh Jacobs. He's not going to be a guy I'm targeting next year. I know, like, he still finished as a top 10 guy. It's just both years that he's been with the Packers. It started off hot and then just completely sizzled out right in the second half of the year. And you don't want to take that chance again. And, if he keeps dropping in drafts and he's a great cost, maybe, but he turns 28 in February. His efficiency has been way down. Now he has been dealing with some injuries, but only 3.9 yards per carry this season. And, in this wild card game, he got a good amount of carries. He got 19 carries, but only 55 rushing yards against those Bears for 2.9 yards per carry. And with including this playoff game, it's now been 5 of the last 7 games with fewer than 10 fantasy points and fewer than 7 in 5 of those games. So I like Josh Jacobs. I think his time might have run out of him being like an elite fantasy running back. He's going to be more of that low end RB2 for me, and he'll have some good games still. He's on a good offense, but with the way he has failed to stay healthy and be productive in the final half of these seasons scares me. But you're right. Tucker Kraft being back kind of throws a wrench into things because we don't know, Christian Watson with Tucker Kraft, who will be that top guy. But I think with Christian Watson, he might be the one guy I'm interested in next year because he's pretty much just a cheaper Jameson Williams. And, if you can get those guys that can have those monster games, but you don't have to rely on them every week, I kind of like that. So if Watson's price stays low, I could see him being on a lot of my teams next year.
Yeah, and that's what you want. I mean, I don't know if Matt LaFleur is going to want to borrow anything from Ben Johnson from a couple years ago, given how they have an icy relationship here, but you could see some parallels. If you're going to throw out Watson as Jameson Williams, can Matthew Golden be that next step as a first round pick and be their Amon Ra?
No,
Can we have Tucker?
I'll answer that for you. No.
Okay. That's what ideally Tucker Kraft could be there against Sam Laporta. I mean, he's a field stretching guy that has a lot of athleticism. I think legitimately he could be good, but we have to see how he recovers from this injury and see if he has the same kind of explosiveness that he had at this point. So Golden does raise a lot of questions that would say Watson should be the leading target guy on this team, maybe right up there with Kraft, assuming he's healthy. So there's a lot to answer here with the Packers. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we're going to be banging the table to take Packers next year in fantasy drafts. I mean, if it's just Watson and we're kind of even excited to go after, like, I think this is going to be a middle to bottom type offense that we're going to be targeting in fantasy drafts in 2026. So I don't know what we're going to do with the Chargers, Michelle. What do we do with their weapons? Is there something worth going after? It was a disappointing season all around for everyone in that organization with the Greg Roman lame duck season. So we'll get into that team and what they do after their really no offense loss there in New England. This episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by Gusto. And if you don't know Gusto, you should be. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets. That's where Gusto comes in to take the stress out of your payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle or hidden fees. Gusto's automated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposits save you hours every week. And knowing you can reach certified HR experts anytime gives you real peace of mind. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL and get 3 months free when you sign up and use your first payroll. That's right. 3 months of free payroll running at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time, that's Gusto, Gusto, gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The divisional playoff round is here, and FanDuel is officially in full playoff mode. Every game day during the next few rounds, a championship game ahead, as well as the big game in Santa Clara. FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. There's only a few games left in the season, so go after it, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback, player coaching. Boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost and go after even bigger payouts when the playoffs get rolling here. These games are going to be fantastic this week. We'll have a lot more in those games here later in the week. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost back every NFL playoff game day. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show looking at the Chargers. And to say their season was disappointing would be an understatement. Okay, let's start with this. Justin Herbert was QB 10. Did it feel like it? Absolutely not. It was a grind to watch this guy, and then he lost both offensive tackles. He had one gone before the season, Rashawn Slater. Joe Alt came back for a short period of time, then he went back down, and then it was disaster. Every team was absolutely teeing off this guy with the pass rush. No time to throw downfield. He didn't run enough to escape that and give us numbers that way. His receivers all disappeared and stunk for us. They were not reliable all the season, and the result is Greg Roman gets fired. So, first of all, do you think this talent level is the issue here? Because now Justin Herbert's been through a few coordinators. It still goes back to his rookie year when he went off, and we haven't seen anything close to that with his consistency or production. Is someone going to save Justin Herbert and make him more of that elite fantasy quarterback that he should be?
Yeah, we'll see if they can get a good OC in here, right? If it's Cliff Kingsbury, who maybe he doesn't get another head coaching job and he lands here. But I am happy they moved on from Greg Roman. I mean, Greg Roman now has just been known to be this pretty boring OC, right? That doesn't offer us a lot of fantasy hope with the passing game. But with Herbert, now it's been 4 straight seasons of disappointing fantasy production. And I get it, quarterback 10 this year. It doesn't seem like the worst, but only 17.9 points per game. Like, you're not winning championships off the back of that. And the year prior, 16.8 points per game. Year prior to that, 18. And then in 2022, 16 and a half. Like, it's been since his first 2 seasons that we've been super happy to roster Herbert. He went through the middle of the season, he went through a good stretch of games where he was really good against the Colts and Vikings and Titans, but then it just kind of fell apart. Now, maybe we can blame that on Joe Alt getting injured. Maybe we can blame it on, especially towards the end of the year with his broken hand. Like, sure, all of that's going to come into play. It was nice to see at a career high 498 rushing yards this season. We want to see more of that. 26 passing touchdowns, not the worst, but the passing volume has to go up. And with the wide receivers he had in McConkey and Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston, like, it should have been better. And Aronda Gadsden, too, who broke out as a rookie. But, like, maybe without Greg Olsen, like, we got to see McConkey be used way more. I think Keenan Allen could be gone. Quentin Johnston was up and down. What are your thoughts on these wide receivers?
Yeah, I think they maybe try to get too creative and involve too many people. That was a problem. I think Ladd McConkey was the dominant force and things were looking okay with the Chargers, right? When he was the number one and getting treated that way. And then they wanted to stretch the field with Quentin Johnston. They wanted to work in Keenan Allen. He was busy early in the season, and that was a flash because later in the season they didn't throw to him as much. And then you had Aronda Gadsden pop up in the middle of the season, and he was having an impact. McConkey was just random. Every few games he would go off. So I'm not quite sure what you're going to get next year. But what I tell you here is that McConkey will rebound. I think he's the guy that he should be the centerpiece. I think the coaching staff that follows will say, why didn't we throw to this guy more? Like, he's a big play guy. We can get him open, find him ways to get in the slot. I think mucking it up a little bit with Allen trying to steal the slot snaps was a mistake. McConkey should be on the inside as much as possible and occupy that role. And maybe we'll see that line type offense happening where he gets the Amon-Ra treatment, and Quentin Johnston is the poor man's Jameson Williams. Get, I think, Allen out of there. I think make it about these three guys, Gadsden, McConkey, and Johnston going forward. They're going to try to make it more interesting than that, but make it a little bit simple for Justin Herbert, right? I think it's too complicated trying to get all this going, and Greg Roman and some of the other looks he has and the run heaviness. Just open it up and just let him chuck, and don't like try to have a mixed identity, which they have had, right? Is it a power running team? Is it a deep throwing team? Maybe it should be melding and meshing both of those things together in more perfect harmony. So I would say the Chargers, again, I'm going to look at a talent. I'm going to say McConkey is the one guy I'm going to look at to rebound. I'm not interested in all. I think Johnson was a little bit big play and touchdown dependent. And then the other player, of course, Omarion Hampton. He still was very good. RB15 when he was on the field as a rookie. He just needs to stay healthy, and I think he has a big second year.
Yeah, I agree. Because if you're already RB15, and remember those first two games of the year, he had Najee Harris in front of him, wasn't getting much work. Week 3 is really where his work exploded without Harris there. So if you just take weeks 3 through 18, Hampton was the running back 9, averaging more than guys like Kyron Williams and Josh Jacobs and Chase Brown during that span, just behind Derrick Henry and James Cook there as well. So averaging 15.7 points per game. And even when he hasn't been fully healthy, he's still producing, right? So I think you get Joe Alt back, you get Rashawn Slater back. Maybe they can upgrade some of the interior offensive line as well. I think Hampton's going to have a really big year next season and could be, I think he's going to be expensive, but if you could get him late in the second round, I would love that value for him. So I'm going to be eyeing Hampton for sure. And I agree with you with Loudon McConkey. I think he should be the guy that steps up. Keenan Allen, he was on a 1-year contract. There really is no reason to bring him back, I don't think. I mean, his efficiency was pretty terrible there in the second half of the season, averaging under 8 or fewer yards per reception in 6 of the last 7 games of the season. That's terrible, terrible efficiency for a wide receiver. And he was still getting targets that were taken away from McConkey. Get McConkey back in the slot more, get him more targets. I think McConkey could be a good value as well. That will be it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in to Locked On Fantasy Football. On our next show, we'll be getting into the 2 Saturday divisional round games. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Fantasy Football so you get all the latest episodes. And again, if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Fantasy Football ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonfantasyfootball.supercast.com or check the links in the show notes to join the club. We'll talk to you later. Bye, y'all.